Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Unearthly Bureau. My name is Caroline McKendrick Gibson, and with me this evening, I have my wonderful co-hosts, Kristian Lander and Martin Gibson. And this evening, we're going to be speaking to the wonderful Louise Joy. But this Unearthly Bureau is a podcast where we touch on hot topics in anomalous phenomena and everything 14. We want to dive deep down those rabbit holes and ask those questions that people don't really want to talk about, and all those unanswered things that you're waiting to get the questions answered. So come along with us and join us tonight on the dark tourism journey with us.
I've been forwarded a bio all about you. So if I was to read this, would you agree or disagree? So I've got here Louise Joy bio. It says you are the founder of the Morbid Tourist, the UK's first blog dedicated to dark tourism. With a background in journalism, marketing, and 10 years of blogging experience, she creates guides to haunted places, folklore-filled destinations and spooky stays, and helping curious travellers discover the darker side of the UK. So, is that you summed up in a nutshell?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I would say so. I've been running the Morbid Tourist for just under 3 years now, and at the moment it's kind of more tailored towards light dark tourism because like dark tourism has obviously changed in recent years. But I am kind of planning to do more deep dives into folklore destinations, spiritual destinations. I even want to kind of sum up my favorite world mysteries and conspiracy theories. So it's just a very wide net that's going to be covered eventually.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us here tonight on our jaunt into the dark, weird, and wonderful world of the paranormal and everything, and all the topics that surround it. I think Caroline mentioned quite clearly there. I think when you talk about the paranormal, it's one umbrella, but actually, with haunted tourism, there is that kind of almost. How do you put it? It's almost events. Those kind of atmospheric themed places. There is some places that have. There's a crossover of interest, isn't there? And I think that's where, to my understanding, dark tourism kind of blends into the paranormal. So there touches things from conspiracy theories to just, a nuclear bunker, for instance, or it could just be a sacred tree of some kind that's been burnt by lightning. They are all kind of tourist hotspots for the dark tourist. But yeah, so it's going to be a fun ride this evening. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Kristian. So, Louise, thank you again for joining us this evening. But for listeners who don't actually know the term dark tourism, how can you define it because obviously it goes beyond things like visiting sad places. How would you describe it for the listeners who don't understand what dark tourism is?
Yeah, so traditionally, dark tourism is when you visit destinations associated with death or tragedy. That was kind of the original meaning of it. But kind of when you think about it, dark tourism has been around for a really long time. Years and years and years ago, like centuries ago, we'd have people visiting, public executions and things like that. So people have always been interested in dark tourism without quite realizing what it is. But I do think in recent years it has expanded a lot. So it doesn't necessarily mean just visiting sad places or places that are associated with, dark events anymore. It's definitely expanded to, I guess, kind of like a lighter form of dark tourism as well. And, that there is a study into the fact that dark tourism does have a spectrum. You have like the very, very dark side of it and the light side of it that might involve ghost tours or paranormal investigations, or perhaps even visiting Stonehenge. Stonehenge is, it has a lot of folklore history and a lot of theories too as why it's there. So yeah, it's very varied, but what I would say is kind of anything to do with like the spookier and eerier side of life.
Thank you. And why do you think that people are drawn to dark tourism? What do you think they get from it?
I think it's a few things really. I think a big one is kind of education and learning more about the destination. You've got kind of Jack the Ripper destinations in London. Jack the Ripper was very glorified and glamorized and things like that, but people just love to know, try to work out who he was and the history behind it. So that's definitely a big part of it. I think it's just like eye-opening as well. People like to visit destinations to learn more about the dark history overall. People might just want to have a paranormal experience if they go to a haunted jail. Yeah, it varies really. And personally, I know it can be quite dark and morbid sometimes, but some of the places I visit, they're just like really fun. Like visiting Stonehenge was like a fun little road trip for me. And yeah, it was just nice to kind of go along and try and work out why Stonehenge was built. Or, you know, when I got home, I did a bit more research into people have seen kind of like UFOs hovering over Stonehenge and stuff like that. So yeah, it's very varied.
I mean, talking of Stonehenge, so my mother, her dad was based at a army base nearby in the 1960s. And on a Sunday, what would happen is that they would all go out as a family. So grandfather, grandmother, my grandfather, grandmother, and their 4 kids, and they would go to Stonehenge to have a picnic every Sunday and have their Sunday lunch in and around the stones. Because at that time, it was literally left in the wastelands, effectively. There was no kind of tourism industry around Stonehenge at that time. You literally could walk straight up to them, and they were in a state of, not disrepair, but they were covered in, like, all the grass was kind of overgrown nearby. People would make their jaunts there, but generally speaking, it was kind of just left in the land. To my understanding, with Stonehenge particularly, in more recent times, they've actually found a wider henge, and an even much more wider henge, like 2 miles out, a wooden one all the way around. There's another stone circle nearby that might have some significance. And I think when you look at those particular locations, those edifices, megalithic structures, there is there's a drawing to them, because they can hold such power, they hold such mystery, that, you know, we want to tap into whatever it is that we're there. And when you touch a stone, when you touch one of these buildings, there's a remarkable feeling that you actually might hold some kind of connection to what it is that they are. And does that resonate with you? When you touch things like that, when you're in that space, how does it make you feel?
Well, with Stonehenge, obviously, when I went, I couldn't walk directly up to the stones, but I did kind of feel like there was some sort of energy there. But I tried to be quite, I guess, like more realistic. Like, I would love to be one of these people that has a gift that I could just go and sense something's there. Unfortunately, I don't. So, you know, whether that was just because of everything I've read about Stonehenge, or maybe I wanted to feel something. But I do think there is definitely, you know, people can go to places and feel a certain energy that can't always be explained. I definitely think that's definitely a thing.
Hey, Martin, what do you think about that? If you're feeling a space psychologically, what do you think's going on in the mind? What's tickling us?
I think we all want to find these answers, don't we, to the stuff that we can't explain. And I guess one of the maybe answers to that is that our chemicals change in our bodies when we do these things. So we can create all sorts of different chemicals. If we go to a scary place, for example, we create more adrenaline and some dopamine as well, which makes us feel pretty good. So actually, we're sometimes we're craving these places because of the chemicals that we're dispersing when we go to them.
So
it's like a feel-good factor then. It creates that, is it oxytocin factor, yeah, or something, or dopamine?
Well, that, oxytocin is a bonding chemical. So, lots of these things we like to do, we like to go in groups, don't we? And when we do these things, we're releasing oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical, and it feels good. We're looking for answers as well, though, aren't we? I think that's our inquisitive nature wants us to do that.
I think it's important to remember as well that you will go to some places and they will try to make you feel a certain way. Like, I went to the Zach Baggins Museum in America and I found one room really over emotional and overwhelming, and I thought that was quite weird. But when you go inside, when you're reading about all the history of the people that it was Dr. Death's van, basically, and they had kind of all the information on the walls about people that had died in the van, and they had really sad music playing and certain scents pumped into the room. And I kind of walked away thinking, do I feel like, obviously it is a very sad subject, but because I was so overwhelmed, I was probably made to feel that way. You know, they did that specifically by playing that sad music, for example. And yeah, that's another interesting take.
So would you class that as manufactured priming then, to get you to feel a certain way?
I would say so. I think some places have definitely do that, but you know, you obviously have that dark subject already, so you probably do feel a little bit sad, but it's probably amplified, certainly.
That's interesting, isn't it? You know, they are designed to make you feel a certain way. And what you were saying there, Martin, is that essentially we go to these places and we get, you know, this chemical release. We get a bonding experience with the people who are around us. Does it actually become an addiction?
Well, we crave it. The dopamine we crave. It's like a chemical reward. So, you know, and we release dopamine amongst other chemicals when we do certain things. So, and it's all to do with, it all boils down to survival. But it's getting a bit boring now. But you know, when we were living in caves, if we went hunting and gathering, we would create these chemicals all in the right balance, and they would have made us feel good. And scientists are adamant that the caveman, you know, felt that reward, and he knew it was good. It helped him to cope as well. So there's things, certain things we do that release these chemicals.
So
and so we crave more of them. It's to get us to do the same things again and again and again. If you think about it, you know, a group of people together, when we were living in caves, were probably more likely to survive than if you're on your own. So interacting with others would release those chemicals, for example.
Louise, has there been an influx in dark tourism? Have you seen an increase in the amount of different venues and places over the last few years?
I would say so, but I think it's also to do with the fact that, you know, people are able to find these places easier. You know, I have quite a few kind of old books about haunted and mysterious places, but now that we have the internet at fingertips at all times, it's so easy to connect with others that are interested in dark tourism. I definitely think a lot of companies are realizing that it's becoming bigger and bigger. It's not just a thing for Halloween anymore. People don't just like visiting haunted places because it's Halloween. They love experiencing these things all year round. And I've definitely seen a huge increase in it in recent years.
So where would we draw the line between money making to protect a building and upkeep of like a historic area, or, you know, ethical investigating? Where do we draw the line between the two?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's hard to know, really, because, you know, there are so many pubs, for example, like historic pubs, for example, around the UK that would claim to be the oldest and the most haunted pub in the UK. And I'm a firm believer in the paranormal, without a doubt, but how do you prove that without going there and spending, you know, every single weekend there yourself and trying to prove that something's haunted? So I think, you know, it's a weird one. I think it's helpful in a way if it brings people into your pub and like helps pay for restoration and upkeep and things like that. But I don't think people should necessarily be saying something is haunted when it isn't. So yeah, there's definitely a balance, I think.
Kristian?
I was just going to say on that very note there was a pub that existed on Nottingham's Mansfield Road. It's gone now, perhaps due to this very problem. Probably about 10 years ago, I saw an advert on, I went into the pub, and it's quite a nice little, like a stable coach kind of inn. It has a coaching doorway, painted white. I think it's called the Nag's Head. And I was in there, and a guy says to me, "Oh, this is a haunted pub." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, is it?" He goes, yeah, there's plenty of ghosts been seen here. And about a week later, I saw in Nottingham's Evening Post, I think it was, or the Hucknall Dispatch or something, an article of saying that, the venue is now opening itself up to ghost investigations. And there was a number there to call and to come and arrange an investigation. So I rang the number, curious about what it is that's actually there. And it turns out it was the pub owner himself was the one organising and running the ghost investigations there. And then, so again, I returned to the pub. This guy wasn't there at the time. So I asked one of the patrons who was there, I says, hey, have you heard any haunted stories here? And he's like, no, the guy says behind the bar, though, he's going to turn it into a haunted venue because it makes lots of money. It gets people to come in because we're in Nottingham. And I was like, So the guy who's the owner of the pub is the one now sharing the venue's now a haunted location. He's the owner and the organiser of said ghost hunts at said venue. And you're going, and your patrons are telling me that it's not haunted at all, and you've told them that it's not haunted, but it now has a spooky cellar, and you can flog people to come and pay 60 quid a pop to come in. There's a phrase that my friend Mark Simpson used to say, is that the paranormal economy, it's rigged game. You can say that a place is haunted just because it looks a little spooky, just because it is a cellar or is a location that it has the atmosphere perhaps, and you can, people will happily pay to be in that space. Ooh. Caroline, so you obviously look after quite a few places that are like that, don't you? You have quite a few locations that you are sort of a manager or a promoter of, aren't you? So how do you find that you have to balance history with essentially the economy and raising money?
We do things in an ethical manner. So primarily we're called in by a business owner, and the business owner would say, can you come and have a look at this issue that we're having? Staff are walking out, they're having things thrown at them in the kitchen. So really, we go in on a case scenario and have a look. And obviously with the research side that we do, the first thing I start doing is unearthing ancestry and checking the local history and information that I can gather. When we've got something pertinent, we then investigate ourselves to see what we can come up with and if we can reproduce something. Only if we find that we can reproduce anything and it has grounding with what the claims are that are told to us, then we would look at a suggestion of putting an event on for them. We would never think it was ethical to do it in any other way. Obviously, Martin and I are trained via ASAP. We're very much into ethical investigating, and also we've been field investigators for the SPR and ASAP. So for us, there isn't really any other way of doing something apart from maintaining truth, ethical investigating and maintaining facts. But there are a lot of things that you need to be very aware with some of these properties. They're on a balance, a very, very fine balance between tipping and losing that business. So if we can do something to help them, to bring some money in, to keep the finances coming in, to upkeep the building and to look at it in that way, we run these events. But it's very much a come with us and see how we ethically investigate. Obviously, it's got to have some kind of, for entertainment purposes, attachment to it, because it's not how we would conduct a private case for people. But we make that very, very sure when we run these events that this is how we're approaching it from an entertainment point of view, but they get to see how we would investigate some of what we would do. But yeah, it's all about truth gathering, keeping the facts correct. I mean, we have a lot of people who claim to have psychic ability come out on our investigations with us. And the amount of times I'm being handed a piece of paper saying, here's a drawing of a ghost that I've seen and I've interacted with it. If she tells me the name of this ghost is Martha Smith, who lived at X, house on this journey, and she was killed by this psychopath with an axe kind of thing, and I know that to be factually correct, then she's got herself a hit for historic information, and I would keep that information that she's given me and we would log it onto the case file. If I cannot find anything, if she says, well, there was a John Brown who was a vicar who killed cats, and that's what he was famous for, if I haven't heard of it and I haven't dug it up and it's never been passed to me, it's not going in the fact file. So we make sure that we're quite methodical with our information. We don't dismiss everything, but we just keep it off the records, the official register of records, for what we've found in our cases. I haven't missed anything, I don't think, Martin, have I?
No, I don't think so.
So, Louise,
no.
How do you find that some places might claim they are more than they are to get tourism? How does that ethically sit with you?
It varies really, because if you're in a position where you own a pub and all your staff are leaving because they think it's haunted and you're losing out on money, then obviously you are going to want to recoup that money. I think it's okay to an extent to allow people to do investigations to prove whether something is haunted or not. But I don't think it's fair to just say something is haunted when it's not. If you're just building a story to bring in money, I think that's very unethical. And it's the industry where not everyone believes in the paranormal as it is anyway. So you have to be as truthful as possible regardless, because you don't want to be kind of, going on and promoting like, oh, I've been to this really, really haunted place that claims to be haunted, and saying that you've experienced something when you actually haven't, because you're just, contributing to the story. So, yeah.
You actually made.
I think with different levels of education in the paranormal, people can misinterpret things that happen. So there is some use of some equipment that we don't advocate use of. So cat balls and K2s, there were so many different failings that can happen with this equipment. And we have, every time we run an event, we do have members that come along that like the oohs and the ahs, we call it, and things that flash. So they walk around with their version of the K2 and go, oh, look, I'm interacting with a ghost because my mic's going off. And oh, look, the REM pod's going off. And then Martin and I just smile and say, no, we've just used the walkie-talkie that we've got in our hands. And because the walkie-talkie is, in effect, been activated, that sent some kind of interaction with that piece of kit. So don't panic. Please dismiss that. That's not paranormal in our respect. So there is a slight mismatch of education sometimes, which lead people to misunderstandings.
I think a lot of people will go along to an event and they'll experience something, and without investigating it further or looking into why that thing might have happened, they'll just go home and say, oh, I've experienced something paranormal. But that's not always the case. Like me, when I visit somewhere and something a little bit weird happens, I try to learn more about why that's happened, because I don't want to just claim something's haunted when it's not.
No, it's good. It's a good base to be from, right? I think there's an ethical point. I think it's quite sensible to yourself. You're just not to trick yourself and come at it with a level of authenticity. You can say, I'm true to myself because I am willing to experience and listen and learn, as opposed to going, oh my God, I've just seen, a werewolf, or, who knows what I've seen here. But can I perhaps cycle back a little bit about your origins in this space? I mean, so what was the first place that you that you visited, perhaps as a child, perhaps as a teenager, where you realise now, looking back, it was in fact a tourist and dark tourist spot? Now, perhaps looking back, did you visit a graveyard when you were a kid or whatever, and you noticed that weird-looking that stone or whatever? Is there any places that you remember being, or remember the first time you realised it was a little bit weird and spooky to be there?
My parents took me to kind of loads of castles and stuff when I was quite young, but I don't remember a lot of that. But kind of probably one of the first things, I wouldn't say like it's traditional dark tourism, but my sister used to have this really nice tradition of, like, my birthday is very close to Christmas. So she would take me to London for the day and take me for a surprise. And she took me to the London dungeons one year, and I was just absolutely amazed. I was just like, oh, wow, this place exists where it's like really gory and spooky and you're learning about dark history. And although it's not like historically a dark tourism attraction, I was just absolutely fascinated by it. And then kind of like the following year, we did the London Ghost Bus tour. And as we visited more places, I started to realise, oh, this is a really fun way of travelling, and it's a bit alternative to doing the traditional tourist attractions. So, yeah.
So how do you think it's weighted when it comes to things like dark tourism with ghost paranormal events and the more macabre? Do you think it's a 50-50 split?
I think it kind of varies, to be honest. I would say, just as how dark tourism has changed in recent years, I would say paranormal stuff would be definitely dark tourism, although it might not be a site that's traditionally a dark tourist destination. I would definitely say, yeah, it's definitely on that radar, but obviously it kind of varies. Like there is a spectrum between dark tourism and light dark tourism. Like light dark tourism is more the spooky scare attractions, like the London dungeons, for example, or scare attractions at Halloween. So
that's definitely changed its methodology over the years, because I can remember going to the London Dungeon when I was tiny, and it wouldn't have the jump scare as much, would it? So, I think things have changed how they demonstrate themselves with visitors now. What do you think it is that's caused it to go down that road?
I think companies just want to offer something a little bit different. Our generation, when we search for kind of like research into haunted things, most people my age would, rather than look at books or websites, they'd go straight to TikTok. It's short attention spans, the shock factor. That's what people really enjoy these days and what they love. People, and like Martin was saying earlier, people like going and getting scared because it releases those endorphins. And I guess like the London Dungeons, yeah, you can go along and learn about the dark history, but if you've got jump scares and something that's kind of a bit more out there and in your face, it might help you remember it a little bit better and like take in the history more.
Okay, that's a good point. Recently, they've had in Nottingham, there's a massive abandoned warehouse right by the train station in Nottingham, and for the last 2 years they've held like Zombie Fest there, basically where you have, like, I don't know, 1,000 people dressed up as zombies, and they full on LARP as zombies, and the idea is that you have a bunch of survivors run through there, and they do that like twice a year as a bit of fun. And that I think borders the light dark tourism. I think also at Alton Towers, they have the Atmosphere event around Halloween that I think is done by Jason Cole, who used to be on Most Haunted, and I think Jason Cole, actually, he was one of the survivors who won Nightmare, if you ever watched that as a kid. So he obviously did that and won that. And I think he was the organiser of the Atmosphere events, where they basically super decorate the entire location, and they put it into a themed event, and then it's kind of a survival experience, a kind of themed horror event. And that's when you talk about the light dark tourism, it's a scare attraction, isn't it? I mean, do you define scare attraction and light dark tourism slightly differently?
No, I would say it's more the same, but in recent years, absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of scare attractions are taken from history anyway. I went to a new scare attraction near me recently, and one of the mazes was based on a local legend of a local witch. So they do take inspiration from real events the majority of the time.
I mean, do you think there's locations that people shouldn't go as a dark tourist?
Only in the sense that if it's too dangerous, I think, it's okay to visit places that are associated with really dark history as long as you're respectful. I don't think, it's respectful to go and visit a site, I don't know, like a really, really old graveyard and start trampling over the graves and throwing rubbish on the graves. I think as long as you're respectful, I think it's okay. But I guess everyone's opinion varies, really.
Oh, you mentioned there about like walking on people's graves. Is that a superstition you have?
It's not a superstition. I've just never liked the idea of it for some reason. Maybe it's a bit superstitious.
I tend to hold that one too. I'd really try not to walk on someone's grave. I think it's for me. I think it's more of a disrespect thing. I don't want to be walking over anyone. But I was thinking about places we shouldn't go. Where I was like, I'm aware that there's bus tours that go out to like Fukushima and Chernobyl. Where there really is potentially a risk to life there. And that dark tourism where, there's holidays that are like 100 miles from a war zone, for instance. I mean, what do you think about that kind of the dark tourism?
I think if people want to do it, and again, as long as they're being respectful, if they want to risk their lives, then, fair enough. I mean, I would like to go to Chernobyl, but I'm not sure how close I'd want to get to, the really radioactive areas. But yeah, like if people are willing to risk it, and they're being respectful, then why not?
Do you think it's touching back on what Martin said with relation to Chernobyl and the danger places? Do you think that if you're getting that drug hit on a regular basis and you've met with friends and you've had the bonding drug and then you've had the excitement, drug from getting the feel-good factor, does it wane after a long time, and do you have to go chasing a new fix, something that's going to be bigger and better that makes you frightened more?
I think with some people, yeah, it definitely varies. Like for me, I have my limit. Like I love visiting haunted locations, but I'll never stay in a haunted hotel room overnight by myself. I did that once, never again. That's my limit. But other people would thrive off of that. So yeah, possibly.
You've got a story to tell there. So what happened in this room? This hotel room.
Oh,
what happened? Come on, you got a story there.
The one in Essex.
Yeah.
Or the one that I never returned, that I'd never do again.
Hey, throw us both. Why not?
So, well, Martin, you might be interested in this actually. I stayed in what was claimed to be the most haunted hotel in Essex. And because I was told it was the most haunted hotel in Essex, I was on edge all night. I really, really struggled to sleep. And I basically, once I eventually fell asleep, I wasn't sleeping very well. I was just having these weird dreams. And I woke up at 3 a.m. screaming at the top of my lungs because I thought I could feel a ghost sitting on the end of my bed. And in reality, my boyfriend had just got up to use the toilet, go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and he'd walked into the end of my bed and knocked it. But in my dream, I had felt, a ghost sitting on the end of my bed. So that was just my mind completely playing tricks on me. When there was nothing there, it was just because I'd been told that it was a haunted hotel. And yeah, I just can't believe that, like looking back now, I physically felt it, but obviously I didn't feel anything. He just, knocked the bed with his leg. So yeah, that was an interesting experience.
The timings that happened obviously are quite prevalent with psychotherapy. Martin, did you want to explain to Louise about her stress bucket?
Well, yeah, yes, can do. So as we get more anxious, so if somebody's already told you a story, and you know the background to this hotel, then that will start to create anxiety, and it's negative thoughts that create anxiety. So the more negative thoughts you have about things, thinking about things that could happen, the higher your anxiety level becomes. And as it starts to go up, we start to move over to the fight-flight bit of the brain, which is programmed to think totally negatively about things for survival reasons. In other words, if you found yourself next to a grizzly bear, you wouldn't want your brain telling you that you could stick around because it looked like it had already eaten. You'd want it to say you need to run as fast as you can. Yeah, so so as we become more anxious, we start to create even more negative thoughts because it's all we can do. It's all that part of the brain can create, to the point where, our brain starts to look for these things, and we get things like pareidolia, is more likely to take place. And auditory hallucinations, things like that can all happen. When we start to look for things, our brain will generally find them.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. I guess it just goes to show, if you're on a paranormal investigation and you think you've seen something, have you seen something, or is it just your mind playing tricks on you, like exactly, you said, because you know it's haunted? So yeah,
it's the sort of situation where somebody says they've been touched on the back of their neck, and then everybody else is touched as well, because it triggers everyone else to think in the same way. Yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's like
and isn't it when you are suffering from this stress and you're in fight and flight mode and you can manage to get to sleep, there's a time that your brain would go on to download, isn't it, through your REM sleep? Is that about 3 o'clock?
Yes. So we naturally have a way to de-stress, so to get rid of that anxiety, and it happens in our REM sleep. And basically, the intellectual part of the brain starts to look at the things that we've been thinking negatively about, and starts to clear them out. If they're not life-threatening, then they're dissolved, and your anxiety level starts to come back down. If we're very stressed, the brain starts to look at multiple things at the same time, and that can create night terrors and nightmares and things like that. Yeah, if we're really stressed.
I mean, it's wonderful being married to a psychotherapist where he can explain everything to you and make you feel safe. But I'm not going to be staying in a hotel room that's haunted by myself, no matter how much he tells me, because it's still going to have a ghost in there somewhere that will come and get me at 3 a.m.
But the scarier places do create the better memories, because the fear grabs our attention, and that attention makes the story more memorable. So it's the scary ones, like the hotel in Essex, that you will always remember.
So what was the other hotel? So there was two. What was the other one?
Oh, so that was Hocus Pocus Teeny Hotel in York. I'd won a competition to stay there, and it was like this massive room that could sleep 5 people, and I had to go by myself. And I was like, oh yeah, fine. Like, it's a spooky themed hotel, but it's, it seemed like that. I didn't know it had any dark history. And I got there and I took a tour, and they were like, yeah, you're staying in the most haunted room. And I was like, oh, but I'm by myself. I completely regretted it. It was this amazing room, and I spent the entire night in the tiniest bed facing the wall, refusing to even turn around. And I got no sleep because I'd been told that there was a ghost that sat in a chair by the double beds, and I was just like, no, never again. And it could just be my mind, but it's like, I'm a 5-hour drive away from York. I don't want to go stay in a haunted hotel, get no sleep, and have to drive a 5-hour drive home by myself the next day with no sleep. So yeah, that's where I draw my line. I'm very brave, but yeah, that's it for me.
I'm curious. Do you prefer to do it as an individual as opposed to with a group then? Is that kind of your preference?
It depends on who I'm with, really. Like, I do enjoy investigating things as a group. I quite enjoy investigating things when you've got a skeptic in the group, because it's always exciting to be like, oh, tonight's the night I can prove to you that ghosts exist, type of thing. But yeah, it definitely varies, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just thinking about it. So when you go to somewhere and you're in a morbid kind of sense of awe about a particular location, I'm sure you use the default of a graveyard or whatever, do you take with you a particular soundtrack to give you a bit of an ambience about where it is that you're going to, or to set your mind on the way there? Do you play specific music? And if so, could you give me some examples?
I don't actually. I like to go to places as open-minded as possible. If I can go somewhere that I know is haunted, I'd rather not know why it's haunted until afterwards, because I don't want to go in thinking, oh, this place is haunted by a ghost of a little girl, and then my mind thinking I've seen like a ghost of a little girl or anything like that. But maybe kind of listening to certain music would be something I should do in the future.
Yeah. Because you could create yourself like the morbid playlist, as it were. We're going on to, I don't know, Auschwitz or whatever. Should we listen to some Polish folk music? What kind of thing we're going to listen to? Oh man.
I mean, that's not the first time that I've heard of using authentic or relatable music. How many times, Martin, have we gone into a pub that have called us in for a case, and as we've walked in, they've played Ghostbusters?
Oh yes, dozens of times.
Of course.
That's a no. That's a no.
There was a time I went on my local radio station, Hucknall FM at the time, and was a guest. And when I got there, they were playing Ghostbusters as their first piece of music, and it's like, of course you are. And then they committed the most awful sin, is they also played the whole track when I left. So the worst thing about it, if you are listening to the station, you got to listen to the same piece of music within effectively the same hour. And I just thought that, why would you do that as a radio station? Just to kind of go, oh, he's a Ghostbuster. It's awful.
Yeah, it's not the greatest.
No.
Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive now into dark tourism. So if you have places that are known locally to be haunted or have some kind of tragedy that's attached to them, how do you think local communities react living alongside sites of tragedy that are then put forward for tourism?
I think you do get a lot of negativity. A lot of people don't like the idea of tourists visiting their hometown, for example, because of that reason alone. Like in Plague Village, for example, I haven't heard any negativity surrounding that. You can go and visit, you can see outside the plague cottages, and people have information boards outside, and there's one person that has like a little donation box to help upkeep her garden and things like that. And I think it definitely does vary. Like if somewhere's getting really, really busy, and like York gets so busy because of its associations with dark history and ghosts, and I get the feeling from what I've seen online, a lot of residents don't particularly like that. But on the other hand, you have all these people visiting your town or city or whatever, and, you know, shopping in your local shops and, you know, eating at your local restaurants. So it's also helping the tourism as well. So, yeah, I can understand why people would get frustrated or, you know, upsetting. Like some people probably just don't want to remember the dark history that's happened there.
I mean, some of these places with dark tragedy, their history is not that long ago, is it? And what happens if members of the family are still alive that are on the bloodline, and they see these things with maybe incorrect facts and information?
Yeah, it can be quite upsetting, which is why I think it's important to do your research and be respectful when you visit these places. You don't want to, like, you know, visit a place and be like, oh, this is a fun TikTok video I've done and this was really spooky because this happened here. Like that could be so offensive to that family.
I mean, you say that.
Yeah.
Just the other day, I saw someone online, and it was a TikTok video, or like a YouTube short, and they were actually taking selfies, like in a Japanese graveyard. You know, where they're quite strict over there. Is that their graveyard generally is respectful in a way that, like the shrines and so on, you shouldn't take cameras there. And there was this person who was taking selfies there, and you know, you could tell by the people in the background shot were really offended by this. But I don't know beyond what they had said anything or did anything to them. But, you know, it's like taking a selfie at Auschwitz. You know, is that right to do if you're a tourist? How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's right to do at all. Like, I think it's incredibly disrespectful, but you have people that probably wouldn't think that's disrespectful. Like, obviously, everyone has their own opinion, but yeah, I wouldn't agree with going and taking selfies of places like that at all. No, I think you have to be, you know, especially if you're running a blog or website and this is something that you do regularly, you need to be as respectful as possible.
Do you remember the Paul brothers, like Logan Paul and Jake Paul, when they went to the Japanese forest and they came across a body, the suicide there, and they then shot an entire blog video while there, where this person was hanging in the background a few years ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I vaguely remember it, but again, like that type of thing is just a bit. I don't agree with that because it's like, oh, you've just kind of vlogged about that for views and shock factor, but that's someone's family member. You shouldn't be doing that at all.
Yeah,
It's also getting the family history wrong. I mean, I don't even know if Kristian knows this. Martin does, obviously, but there's a serial killer in the UK, John Reginald Christie, from 10 Rillington Place. And through ancestry and research, I found out that not only one, but two sides of my family both lived in that house prior to Christie, during and after. And when there is this chap, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to get sued, but he does a page on Jack the Ripper and also other serial killers, and he just lets people talk about what they want to talk about. And people are sat there saying, well, why did the man who lived in the flat allow things to continue? He must have been involved. Well, hang on a minute. That's a family relation of mine. Please don't say that my family relation was involved with cutting bodies up and putting them under the floor, because he was an old man. And it does upset me. And I try and get the comments taken down, and they're continued. And then he'll revamp that same question another month later, and we're back on the same roller coaster again. So I didn't know this man directly, but my family line and my bloodline is directly linked to him. And I do find it upsetting and very protective, even though I didn't personally know him. So I can only imagine what it would be like for other tragedy sites.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well, because, you know, some things you might visit these places and write about them, or you might hear about it on a podcast, and it's very easy to kind of sit in your car and listen to this serial killer from years and years ago and disassociate. But sometimes you know, you have to remember this is real events. You know, it might be not in a bad way, but it might be slightly entertaining to hear about it on a podcast because you want to learn more about the investigation, for example. But people were still still kill. Do you know what I mean? Like it's still a very grim subject, and it's so easy to dissociate and forget that, really.
Yeah. Kristian.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just debating whether to ask you this question now or hold on a little bit later, because I was wondering, like, do you curate items yourself from like these locations? Do you have a bit of a collection that you're building, or have a kind of almost like dark tourism memorabilia? Do you have anything like that you're building? And if so, I could show us some items that you have.
I don't, because I've recently moved back home to save for a house, and I don't think my dad would appreciate if I had kind of cursed or haunted objects. But I do collect the, like, from like the York ghost merchants and stuff like that. I mean, they're not historic, but they're like cute and spooky, so I have quite a few little ghosts.
That's cool. I like the idea of that. I mean, I can imagine that some people actually like to build their own curated collections, don't they? There's like Steve Wesson, he runs the used to be the Haunted Museum, now it's become the Museum of Curiosities in Nottingham, and his location is generally, it's almost like it's his personal collection of weird and wonderful, dark, macabre, the ghost stuff in there, as that has now become its own venue. So even though it's his own personal collection, I think that's intriguing that a person's got so much stuff that they can now open a location where you can visit stuff. I don't know. That's kind of odd in a strange way, just to as a kind of macabre tourism perspective. You've got too much stuff. Here's the keys to my storage container. Effectively, come and have a look.
I mean, I'd love to collect stuff if I had the space. Maybe one day, but I don't know how I'd feel about, like, I went to Haworth this time last year, and I went into the shop, and this woman had haunted dolls for sale, and I was like, I'm not actually sure if they are haunted, but I'm really tempted to buy one, but I had to stop myself. I was very tempted.
Okay.
So there are some places that actually people would steal little objects, even if it was a stone from the garden. And one of the properties that I covered in my most recent magazine article with Haunted Magazine, it was about Unearthly Bureau. Sorry, it was about misery rooms and attics that have hauntings and things. And in one of the properties that I've covered, people were sending stuff back saying, look, I know that you said that things were cursed here, but can you have it back? And they didn't tell them who it was and what they took, but they just said, since I've taken it home with me, unfortunately, we've had a run of bad luck, so I'm now returning this, something that I stole from your fireplace. So do you think that people do that when they go into these big manor houses and things, that they take things?
I think some people do. I don't think you should, really, because if everyone thinks, oh, I'll just take this little stone, if everyone does that, then it can be detrimental to the property. But yeah, I can imagine why people do that. But they probably kind of pick these up and think, oh, this will be like really cool and spooky to have at home, without really thinking about the consequences of that. Like, I might kind of go somewhere and buy a haunted doll, but if there was an actual cursed object on sale, I would like to do my research, and I don't know, if I was going to take that home with me, I'd have to protect myself somehow, or like do some protection spell or something. But yeah.
You say protection spell. Are you someone who embraces the spirituality around this too? Are you someone who has dabbles in Wicca and Wiccanism? Is that the right word, Wiccanism?
I'm learning.
Yeah. So
since going to dark tourism, it's kind of opened my eyes to a lot of areas.
So is that more esoteric or esoterica, or is it a Wiccan thing you're following, or how would you describe that?
For me at the moment, it's kind of just little rituals. Like, I've been learning a lot about rituals to do by like the full moon, and getting to know myself better and spirituality in that sense. But I also subscribe to like Witch Casket, which is a box that sends you kind of like witchy tools every month, and that's really fun.
Okay, what did you get this month?
Well, I had to pause it for this month because I've run out of space at home. But the one before that, I had a pendulum kit, like a pendulum dowsing kit. And yeah, I'm really excited to get stuck in with that, because I went to a introductory to a paranormal evening recently. And normally when I try out like different things, nothing ever works for me. But I was holding this pendulum and it was just going absolutely crazy. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I want to kind of practice more of that and get stuck into that.
We might have to tell you about the ideomotor movement, but okay, have fun.
Okay. I'm curious now.
Ideomotor movement is really an interesting science that explains some of that stuff. But I do think that people use pendulums, spirit boards as an interesting psychological tool, as a way for themselves, perhaps the people that are around them. It's quite interesting to watch from, if you set out of the circle and watch how it is done, and then perhaps have a go yourself, and also, essentially forge your own experiments with it. Perhaps if you're going to use a spirit board, for instance, it's worthwhile just getting everyone just to put a blindfold on, and then perhaps you as the controller of said experiment were to reorientate the board, and to see, therefore, if the spirit knows where the new locations of the letters are, as opposed to what everyone believes where the letters were. It's little things like that. Or, if you were to use a pendulum, try it blindfolded. If you were to perhaps use the glass divination, maybe use the back of your nail, for instance, as opposed to your finger and your macro muscles here. It's worth setting yourself up with some experiments, and then you, with your other people, can find out how it's done, and also then educate other people how it's done. It's that's always worth exploring. I never encourage a person to not do it. Have a go and then understand what's really happening is also good fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've had a lot of friends
I run with that completely, yeah. So, but when you look back at science, they've been using divining rods for years, haven't they, to divine water and to give you answers. But as Kristian was saying, as long as you understand the pitfalls and how things can fail. I mean, Martin and I, when we ran events, people were screaming, can we have divining rods? Can we have pendulums? So as long as you can set up a scientific experiment that everybody works to the same methodology, they all answer the same questions. And then if you want to put it like 20 people all doing the same thing at the same time, what's the percentage hit rate of everyone getting the same yes or the same no? And then we've expanded that into different investigations using coloured lights. So for yes and no, so it's a little bit like a pendulum, but on coloured lights that you're blindfolded, you've got ear defenders on that you can't hear anything through them at all. And obviously you don't know which one of the lights, the left or the right, is yes or no. So it's just depending when you say, show me your left or your yes, it's the one that they push is that colour. So yeah, experiments can be adapted to be scientific as long as they're repeatable and as long as they're measurable, then yeah, enjoy.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, we're talking there about dowsing rods and so on. I was trying to work out, that there is the age-long suspicion, shall we say, that water companies still use dowsing rods. And I think there was an article in New Scientist, about 2017, though, where I think Thames Water were found to be using dowsing rods, and they got New Scientist basically read an article absolutely slated them for doing so. But I still wonder how much people still use such things to, again, like find water. Do we still use the arcane methods of, I guess every day really we look in the newspaper and we see the horoscopes, don't we? Why do you think there is this still need to still hold on to the arcane technologies behind these things? What do you think still drives that?
Personally, I wouldn't have a clue. I think it's just people have grown up with it. Like, I don't know whether horoscopes are real or not, but I still love to read my horoscope every day. It's just, it's fun to kind of read it and get to the end of the day and be like, did that actually happen? Is that true? But then you get some people would say that a horoscope can be adapted to any situation. Some of them are quite vague. So,
Barnum statement.
Yeah.
Have you ever read? Have you ever read yesterday's horoscope and then ascribed to the details of yesterday to see whether it fitted?
I haven't, but I probably should.
Yeah, you should try that. It's always a fun one. Or if I was at work and it'd be like like the breakfast table at work, and someone go, "Oh, read me your stars," and I'll deliberately read a different star sign to them. And oh yeah, that's right. That's dead on. I've got going on today. It's like, yeah, sure it is.
I think people just want to know themselves better, though, don't they? They're just like, oh, my star sign can probably tell me so much about myself, and yeah.
Yeah, what say you about that, Martin? The idea of these archetypes that apparently can dictate our day-to-day life as a kind of predictor.
Yeah, I think I haven't read a horoscope for a long time, but when I used to read it, you'd always make it fit. Again, when you start looking for it, the brain will normally make it fit anyway.
I mean, how many people, for instance, like say today, for instance, how many star sign readers, astrologists have done a reading for today's date? Because like the newspapers, of course, are printed like 24 hours ahead. Most blogs are made like a month ahead or a week ahead or so on. You know, so if you were to take a horoscope that's out today, for instance, for you today, when was it wrote and who wrote it? And of the thousands of people that do, and because they're so varied and so vague, you know, are they detailed enough these days? You could perhaps fool someone 100 years ago with a vague statement, but now with today's technology, you know, are they even relevant, or do you think people just look at them as a bit of fun?
Me personally, most people would look at it with a bit of fun, but I also think there is another, like a huge interest in that. Like I bought a moon journal a couple of years ago, and it kind of really went in depth about where the moon was every evening and what sign it was in, and it kind of taught you how to read it all and apply it to yourself. And I got too overwhelmed. It was too confusing for me, but some of the like examples it gave were very specific, and I thought I can understand why people would want to study this and you know, plan their week around it maybe.
What star sign are you, curiously?
I'm a Capricorn.
Yeah, okay. So are you taking into account the 13th star sign or not?
No.
Because you have Ophiuchus as well, which is in the year or two. You technically have 13 star signs, just as there actually should be 13 months, because they actually go by the moon cycles. And we never use this one, but what it also means is that all the star sign dates are actually incorrect. They all have to be shifted back by about 5 days to accumulate this extra one to be in there. So if you're on the cusp of like two different star signs, actually you might well be an entirely different one. And then for your entire life, you've been thinking you're an Aries or a Pisces, and it turns out you might be an Aquarius instead, and then it all goes out the window.
Yeah. Like identity crisis.
Oh yeah. Is there enough identities to accumulate for the archetypes? I mean, Martin, you can probably speak to that to some extent, that we have these archetype characters in history, these that we want to ascribe to, profiles effectively of a different way of life. And it is interesting with astrology, they pair certain characters up, don't they? The Taurus is ideal with Aries, or a Cancer is ideal with Sagittarius, or whatever. You know, where do you think those come from? Are they comforting things that we need to have, or are they a way that perhaps in the past we put people together as groups? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's quite comforting, isn't it, for us? That when you look at these star signs, there's nothing really ever negative in them at all, is there? I mean, it's all quite positive stuff, and it's a comfort for us to think, yeah, actually, I fit into that. I fit into Aquarius, or I fit into Capricorn.
So I'm actually looking at the Astro Twins, astrostyle.com here, for your particular star sign. There's an interesting sentence here that fits our current scenario right here, right now, as we record this, is that you need to remind yourself that you do not need to collect every shiny object you see.
There you go.
I wonder if it's just been listening.
That's all good fun. It's all good. So yeah, you could fit it to today. It makes sense. Of course it does.
Yeah. So I'm very conscious of time, Louise. So we've got another couple of questions maybe that we need to broach. So if somebody is considering visiting dark tourism places in the next upcoming year and they've never been before, what advice can you give them? What kind of mindset should they have prior to going?
Definitely always be open-minded. Don't go in thinking I'm definitely going to see a ghost because the space is supposed to be haunted, or you know, if it's a dark history site, make sure you're being respectful. And I think also be respectful of other people as well. You might be going as a group, and some people might be massive believers in the paranormal. Some people might not be, and they might be completely against it. Yeah, just be respectful and open-minded, and do your research as well. I use a lot of kind of like really old books to help me find locations that may not have been not discovered, but may not have been talked about online, but those places might not exist anymore. So do your research in advance if you're going to somewhere particularly scary and spooky, or it's kind of like ruins, be careful, wear proper footwear, that type of thing.
Thank you. Kristian, have you got a last question?
The question I was going to ask, it relates to what you just said there, is that going to places with open mind, thinking of safety in mind. I mean, there is an element of dark tourism with another subject that I see a lot online, and that's urban exploration. Just this evening, about an hour ago, I was watching a video on YouTube short of someone who's basically found like underground bunkers under New York City where they're still set up like the 1960s, old computers they found in there. The offices are still powered up with lights and so on, reel-to-reel machines on the wall, it's really, really deep underground locations. Do you think that urban exploration is a dark tourism?
I think it can be. There's definitely elements of it that can be spooky. Some places, like abandoned places, might be abandoned because of dark things that have happened there. I think it's not something that I've personally explored. I think wouldn't be brave enough to visit somewhere that's abandoned and probably not safe to visit, but it is a huge thing. Like I've seen loads of people kind of talk about it on Reddit and stuff. So
we have a question, of course, from last week's gathering. So for the moment, I'm going to share my screen and play the video clip that I've rounded off separately from last week's conversation that was with the group from Canada. They are SIPA, aren't they? So I'm going to play this clip and you can answer their question. And then we'll play this video to them and then you can ask a question to next week's guest. So if you bear with me, I'm going to hit share, go to Documents, Advanced Video File. I literally was rendering this in the background while we were talking. Question, here we go.
We have a person coming on next week called Louise Joy. She's going to talk about dark folklore. Can you ask a question for Louise, please, for her to answer next week?
Walter?
Yeah, no, I got a good question for someone who has detailed knowledge of that. When it comes to dark folklore, I guess, what is the origin to say what's negative or dark? Because one question that I always have, like Lee always mentions, if something's trying to get your attention, it'll try to talk to you. You don't pay attention. You don't listen. It moves something, you don't listen. What's the next way to get your attention? Scratch you, punch you, pinch you, push you. Now it's got your attention. It doesn't mean it's negative. It just means it wants your attention. So how do you deem something to be dark?
Brilliant question.
Okay, there we are. Let's just back to our main chat here. So I guess the question is there related to you is, well, you heard the question. What's your thoughts?
that is a good question. I mean, he's got a point. Like, just because, if a paranormal entity or spirit is there and they're trying to get your attention, and the only way they can do that is scratching you or something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a dark entity. I don't really know if you could tell, because I've heard stories where dark entities will pretend to be good entities. And yeah, I would say if they're causing a lot of physical harm, then that would be a dark entity, I think.
So, Caroline, would you like to illuminate Louise with next week's guest so she could forward a question into the future?
Yeah, wonderful. So next week we have a chap called Andy Guy on our show. And I don't know if you know Andy Guy, but he builds equipment and he investigates with us. He's part of our extended team. We look at him to develop kit for us for our investigations. And his company is called Sire, SCIRE. You may have heard of the equipment. And next week, we're talking about environmental factors and designing kit for hauntings. So have you a question that you would like to put to him?
Obviously, because we have touched on this slightly already today, is there kind of any bit of kit that you would absolutely not recommend and you would say it's just silly, it's just people playing around, like possibly like cat balls or something else? Is there a piece of kit that you wouldn't touch and you would just love to see people get rid of it and stop bringing it to investigations?
I think that's going to spark off quite a lengthy conversation. That was a very good question. Yeah.
Paying it forward, as we say, and the idea is that we should all elevate and lift each other. We're all in a space where we like to communicate about these kind of weird things. It's really good if we, as I say, that the tide lifts all ships. So I'm all for passing information forward and technically backwards as well. We are time traveling as it were. So it's all good fun.
Martin, is there anything else that you'd like to add for this evening about folklore, and a question for Louise maybe?
So, Louise, what is the place that you would go back to time and time again, and why?
There's so many places. I would probably say at the top of my list would be, at the moment, Bodmin Jail, just because I went last year and I took a fantastic ghost tour, and whilst we were on the tour, the guide Carl mentioned a particular spirit that's always seen on the stairs a certain time of day, and he's not seen every single day, but when he is seen, it's always at 3 p.m. on the stairs. So I'd love to just go at 3 p.m. and just get my camera out and just see if I can finally see a spirit with my own eyes.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that. We've just been down to Bodmin. We went on a press release for their paranormal event that they were holding for their new haunted jail. So, out of interest, would it have been on the naval wing that you're talking about?
So the main one that you go in and you can visit the individual cells. Yes, I think so. I think that's the naval wing.
Yeah, you go down the stairs. You got the cells down there. Yeah.
So
it was.
Yeah.
I think of all the places, if I said to Martin, come on, Martin, let's go and do a single vigil, solo vigil, anywhere in Bodmin Jail, you pick somewhere that you've got to sit for half an hour, where would be the place, Martin, that you would not sit on your own?
The naval wing of Bodmin.
I think when I went as well, they said that there was one cell that they've actually had to section off because the spirit in there was so violent towards women, so they've actually blocked it off now. I'd love to have them open that again and investigate in there and see if anything happened.
I was doing a live. We went into the very first room on the left when you go down the stairs is kitchenette area, and the next one after that, they've got pictures around the wall of dead people. Back in the Victorian times, they used to prop the families up, and then the rest of the family used to get in and have the macabre pictures. When I was in there and Martin was talking and he was giving a little bit of the history about the background, you can hear a breath to my side of where I had my phone going, and I didn't hear it at the time, but it was playing that live back later, and I'm like, well, it's not Martin, and it's definitely a man's voice that, it's like a kind of thing. And he was talking, so it couldn't have been him. So that one was weird. But see, I don't share what we capture because I'm not open for people to scrutinize and say, you fake that. So we just keep that as something that we can't explain, and we enjoy. If people listen to it and they go, oh, did you hear that man's voice? Okay, thanks for pointing it out. And we don't really run with it. It's not what we do. But yeah, I don't think that Martin would go down there on his own.
I have to say, one of my other favourite parts of Bodmin Jail is the most haunted toilet. So it's a cell which has been turned into a toilet, but when it was a cell, it was where Derek Agora was famously outed as faking it. I just love that it's a toilet now, and I can say that I've peed in the most haunted toilet. It's like my favourite fact.
Yeah. There's a big, huge plaque on the wall in dedication to him.
Yeah,
I don't
really
know
funny.
if that's disrespectful or not, putting a plaque to Derek in a toilet.
It depends, doesn't it? What do you guys think?
Oh man, I don't know. I spoke to Derek, I believe only the once, and I've spoken to Gwen a couple of times. His widow, as it were. I always found him to be quite nice, cordial. I think he was very professional. I think he believed in himself. He certainly believed whatever was occurring to him, he truly believed that he was having those experiences. And I don't think even people who have paranormal experiences, those who see colours, those who see ghosts, I don't think we should necessarily dismiss their experiences for their perception. But, I always find them to be quite nice people. And maybe they're telling the truth.
So, Louise, thank you for joining us on the Unearthly Bureau, and we hope that you've enjoyed your delve into the dark folklore and dark tourism that we've taken you on this evening. So, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, please, we'd like to have you back on again. It would be wonderful to have you on in the future again. Kristian.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much for coming on today. Obviously, we had a great chat when we first met. It was wonderful to catch up again today, and I'd love to catch up with you again in the near future. Share some of your experiences that you had between like now and when we pull you back in.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully next time I can say, oh, I've officially seen the ghost.
Maybe, yeah. Martin, thank you for your wonderful insight into the psyche and people's reactions and why we might have the experiences we do. It's always great to have an expert on the panel that we can go to and ask these things. So for another week, that's it from us at the Unearthly Bureau. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care all. Take care.
I think dark tourism as well, like although it's growing, a lot of people still don't know about it or even understand what it is. It still has a lot of negative connotations, like, oh, you must be a really dark person if you like visiting dark places like that. So it's nice to shine a light on it a bit more and show people that it's not all doom and gloom.
To be honest, I thought that dark tourism was more about the macabre with like severed, like you used to get those twin goat heads and stuff. And it would be like the skeleton of the twin goat heads or shrunken heads or something. That's what I thought dark tourism was about. So I've learned a lot today. I actually participate in dark tourism.
Yeah, a lot of people do, and they don't even realise. So, yeah. You're a dark tourist.
I mean, Louise, do you know Peter Laws, Reverend Peter Laws?
No, the name sounds familiar, but
He's certainly very, very popular these days. He came along to do a couple of ASAP talks. Now he's got like 2 million subscribers on YouTube. He's doing incredibly well for himself. But yeah, he's very much. He talks a lot about the macabre, the human interest of the macabre, about how even in the for instance in the church or in aspects of society there's a love around the macabre topic. In films and industry, in entertainment. We are constantly drawn to what's dark about the world. And for instance, there's a reason why topics like Jack the Ripper, for instance, are forever being talked about, because we are interested in what makes the brains tick of people. We want to know why these things are happening, why they're popular. And so he touches into that kind of thing too. So he's quite an interesting character to tap into. And he's also really approachable. So and he might have 2 million subscribers on YouTube or whatever. He's actually a really nice guy to chat with.
That's interesting, because I was looking more into the history of dark tourism the other day when I was updating my website, and I learned that some people refer to it as thanatourism, but thanatourism actually refers to why people visit these locations, whereas dark tourism refers to visiting these locations, and thanatourism is more about the human psyche and why we're so fascinated with it all. So yeah, I'll definitely check him out.
Yeah, I mean, just on that note then, before you get away, I mean, share a bit about that. Yeah, so thanatourism, I've not heard that term. Share me about it. I'll cut it into...
Oh, I don't know a lot. It's just literally, I'm just updating my page about dark tourism, and because people refer to it ways, you've got dark tourism, paranormal tourism, graveyard tourism. Yeah, and I just learned thanatourism is a different term, but it's more related to behind and why people visit dark tourist locations as opposed to visiting those locations.
Okay, so it's kind of researching the psyche of people, is that right?
Yes, yeah, and like you were saying before, like what fascinates people, why people are drawn to visiting these places.
Yeah, so like people like the idea of going to like mental asylums and so on, don't they? They like that kind of thing. We had on the ASAP talks a few months ago. We had William Tabone on from the Australian Spiritual Society, Paranormal Society, and his most frequent location is the Arundel Asylum in Melbourne, and that's like a key location for lots of weird stuff going on there. But he was saying that there's people are drawn to it just because it has that morbid history of where people were, had lobotomies and people had they went a bit crazy while in there, or perhaps they were crazy in the first place and then put in there, and that draws people. Even now, 100 years later, and now it's a tourist location, and people are drawn to these places. Do you think also people want to know why people do what they do? And what I mean by that is if you look on the magazine section at every checkout in Morrison's, you go through, and there's just a whole line of like morbid magazines, like True Crime, Death magazine, you know. You look at like Let's Chat on the front cover, it's like a story that might be I murdered my 3 cats, for instance, on the front cover. You know, but these are the most popular magazines. They're still on sale. How is that even possible?
I think it's just, you know, people just love that type of thing. Like, you read like really trashy magazines, like, oh, my husband ran away with my hairdresser and stuff like that. And I think a small part of it is like, oh, thank God my life's not that bad. That hasn't happened to me as well. So,
Yeah.
but it's like you said as well, like, you know, I love going to paranormal investigations. I would love to see a ghost, but I don't know what I'd do if I did see a ghost, because that would just blow my mind, because that would just change everything I thought about life and death. It's like, how would I even deal with that information? So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
So what happens if you see a half translucent person walk across the room? What do you think then?
I'd probably wet my pants and run away.
So do you think ghosts are transparent, or do you think we see ghosts all the time and we don't realise they're dead?
I'm not sure really. I think they are transparent, but I think it also depends on, like, you know, everyone has their beliefs, but I think it depends on the energy as well. I think, like, if I'm sat in a bright room, I don't know, watching TV, I'm not going to see a ghost. But if I'm kind of doing an investigation and I've got that belief and no, I'm putting that energy out into the world and helping that ghost be seen, then maybe that's what helps the ghosts come through.
Or maybe
They feed off that energy, maybe.
do you think ghosts are time travelers, or someone we're looking through time as opposed to the ghost is here and is the dead person?
I have heard that. It could be. I know some people think ghosts are just memories, aren't they? And like time slips. You know, there's so many different theories.
No, indeed. That's why I wanted to pick your brain and see what yours were.
I don't know. I have so many different theories. I think I still like to believe it's the traditional ghosts with unfinished business.
Well, we like that. We like that. Ghosts with unfinished business.